Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to everybody that's joined. This is the first quarterly training of 2023 of the Minnesota Transformation Initiative. Today's topic is managing through change. My name is Stacy Jones. I'm an associate with the Institute for Community Inclusion at the University of Massachusetts at Boston, or ICI-UMass for short. And before we kick things off, just a few housekeeping items. All participants are on mute to reduce background noise. You'll have the opportunity to type directly into the chat box if you have questions, and we will be monitoring the chat box throughout the presentation, but we'll be holding questions until the end. Today's session is being recorded, and that recording, along with today's presentation slide deck, will be sent out to everybody via email following the presentation for anybody that registered. And we'll also drop a copy of today's PowerPoint in the chat box throughout the presentation if you want to download it that way as well. For anyone that's joining us for the first time, just a really quick reminder that the Minnesota Transformation Initiative is made possible through a grant from the Minnesota Department of Human Services and is in partnership with the Institute on Community Integration at University of Minnesota, as well as ICI-UMass Boston, Strengths at Work LLC, the ARC of Minnesota, and Quillo. And this initiative is designed to help provider organizations to move away from supporting employment that pays subminimum wage and to expand competitive integrated employment and community life engagement outcomes. And part of the MTI project includes the opportunity to put on quarterly trainings like the ones that we're doing today, where we focus on themes related to organizational transformation and best practices. So this webinar series is also brought to you in partnership with Minnesota More. We also want to point out that the MTI project has a web-based landing page where you can access PDFs of the PowerPoint. The PDF of this PowerPoint includes a hyperlink that you can click on, and that landing page, you'll see things like information about this project, as well as some resources that you can download. You have the opportunity to register for any upcoming trainings that will be posted, and the recordings of past trainings are also housed there. And now that we've gone through that housekeeping, I'm going to turn things over to my colleague, Brian, to take things from here.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brian Bajan. I work for the University of Minnesota Institute on Community Integration. For today's topic of managing through change, we're thrilled to have with us three organizational leaders. One was a last-minute addition, so unfortunately we don't have a picture of them, but we'll tell you a little bit about them. So these organizational leaders will be sharing a little bit about their organization's transformation stories and how they successfully managed through the ups and downs and challenges that come along with transformation. Our first presenter today is Tim Schmutzer, Executive Director for Phase Industries, operating out of East Central Minnesota. Tim has spent 2 decades working in and providing consultation to nonprofit human services, transportation, and other healthcare systems to stabilize, build, diversify, and successfully align and merge entities. Tim completed his postgraduate education in counseling psychology and neuroanatomy at University of Wisconsin-Madison. He is a certified practitioner of the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, or MBTI instrument, a graduate of the Minnesota Council of Nonprofits Leadership Institute, and actively participates on local economic development authorities and several regional and statewide boards of directors. Also joining us today is Tammy Reuter. Tammy serves as Chief Business and Marketing Officer for MRCI out of Mankato. Tammy's focus in the nonprofit industry includes work on developing the talents of the future workforce. Her past professional roles as Executive Director of South Central College's North Mankato Campus Foundation and Vice President of Operations for Junior Achievement were firmly grounded in developing the potential of others. Tammy also finds inspiration from many of the organizations she personally supports with her contributions of time, including the YWCA, PEN, Greater Mankato Growth, St. John's Church, and several others. And then our last presenter is also with MRCI, and their name is Nate Lawton. And Nate, you're going to have to tell everybody a little bit about yourself when we turn it over to you. All right, next slide, please. Thank you, Stacy. So before I pass things over to Tim, we want to start by taking a quick poll to find out about who's joining us for today's training. We want to know what's your primary role. You'll have the option to choose between senior leadership, mid-manager, employment staff, residential staff, day services staff, case manager, or other. Looks like we got folks responding to the poll now. And we know that at nonprofit organizations, it's common to have multiple roles. So just choose the one that you think most closely aligns with what you do. If none of these fit, then choose other and feel free to type your role into the chat box.
And Brian, I'm going to end the poll because it looks like we've stopped.
Okay. All right. So as you can see, take a look at the poll to see who our audience is. Looks like primarily we've got a lot of senior leadership here. So with that, I am going to hand things over to Tim.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. That poll was helpful, by the way. I appreciate knowing the audience, and actually we'll make a couple last-minute changes to try to tailor it a little differently. I appreciate the opportunity to spend the next 25 minutes with you. Hopefully I can share and provide some practical lessons learned from our own organizational transformation journey, as well as some considerations on where to start. I am fortunate enough to spend my occupational time and energy at a rural East Central Minnesota provider organization, where it just so happens that my beliefs in the work that we do and the organization's beliefs are perfectly aligned, which is why it's the first place I've worked where that's been the case, and I've been here almost 15 years. I'm sorry, Stacy, I'm gonna forget to say next slide, please. And being the type of presenter I am, I go off script. So if that's okay, if you can intuit a little bit.
Absolutely, yep.
I appreciate that, thank you. So as to not, sorry, I have to start my stopwatch. Otherwise, you guys are gonna be stuck with me for the next like 4 hours, because I love this topic. So in the next 23 minutes or so, I hope not to waste your time. I hope what you can leave with is gaining something useful around looking at a particular framework for approaching your own organizational change, regardless of your position. Doesn't matter if you're a CEO, executive director, president, week-old direct support professional, case manager. What I'll repeat throughout the next 20 minutes or so is that we are all leaders, and your potency as a leader is as much or as little as you choose it to be. Further, I hope I want to pay attention to some key foundational components in transformation, one in particular that I'll spend the bulk of my time with. And then lastly, just some practical examples of our own trial and error that hopefully will be useful in your own work. Next slide, please. This slide is not new to anybody here, most likely, but in the 10 essential elements of provider transformation, which we've all been trained on before, we have those 3 categorical areas, right? We have leadership, focus, and values, which is the place I'm going to spend the most time in today. The infrastructure, operations, and finance, again, those operational areas, and then the employment practices, community life engagement, what I tend to call the value-based approach areas. The first area You can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. While it's labeled leadership, focus, and values, I really like to call it purpose, inspiration, and influence. This is where it all starts. Transformation to me is a big, scary type of term sometimes, until I realized this. Everything in nature is transforming at all times, including you, me, our organizations, our families, our loved ones, the trees around us, everything, the winter weather. And so our choice is whether it happens to us or it happens with us and our influence. And with that, any organization and any leader and all leaders and organizations have a responsibility to look at your mission, vision, and values, where it all starts. What is it we hope to accomplish? And what's our vision, right? And what values are we going to place on determining what those are and follow as we carry out the work? I won't go through every single one of these bullet points. You have it on PowerPoint, except to say this. The place to start, we want to know what we do. We want to know how we're going to do it. Sometimes, purpose is important, and organizations all have these. You could all tell me probably right now, if I said, what do? You could give me a 1 to 2 sentence accurate description of it. If I ask how you do it, you could give me a 1 to 2 sentence description of it. If I ask why you do it, if I ask you, why does your organization do it? Can you readily give me that 1 to 2 sentences? We start with the why because transformation is powered by belief, and belief is the answer to the why that we ask. Why do you do what you do? What in it fulfills you? In a moment, I'm going to talk about a model that many of you have probably seen before. It's real simple. It's from Simon Sinek. It's called the Golden Circle. In answering your why, especially organizationally and in your occupation, what it's going to help you do is it's going to provide clarity. It's going to create a lens through which you can monitor, measure, have what your mission, vision, and values are every day. It's an essential building block, and ultimately it creates the culture of alignment. Thank you for the movement on the slides, Stacy. So quickly, okay. Every organization, every person's career operates on 3 levels. And I'm going to start using my hands to point, and I know you guys can't see it, but just envision it. What we do, how we do it, and why we do it. Successful organizations, movements, politicians, people start from the inside out. Why do you do what you do, and then move to how and what? Conversely, most organizations, and this bears out throughout time, and there's thousands of examples of where this didn't work, start from the outside in. What do you do? How do you do it? And many never get to the why. Simon Sinek, who developed this, he's self-described as an optimist who believes in a brighter future for humanity. I love that description. When I was asked for a bio, I've always wished I could just have one line that says something like that. He's also the author of Find Your Why and the designer of this particular, what looks to be simple, but is also a very practical model in determining your why. It's also a framework that helps leaders and organizations inspire cooperation, trust, and change. At the end of the day, People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And if we had a lot more time, you could look at political campaigns across, well, the last 300 years, but even look at the last 50 or the last 20. What was the difference between losing and winning candidates? What spoke to people? When organizations look at the what and how, what are they looking at? What are they answering? They answer the operational components. They answer, it originates, they have to access their executive functions of the brain. How do we plan? How do we carry out that plan? How do we create the language that's gonna instruct us on how to carry out the plan and communicate, right? When you get to the why, that's a limbic part of the brain, as Sinek would describe. And that's the part of the brain that sometimes we think of as a gut feeling, intuition. It doesn't have language. There's no language attached to that. There's no neural activity associated with language with that brain. It's what speaks to, if you will, the soul of the person, the heart of the person. That's why sometimes we can be provided every fact and figure and compelling argument to think or do a certain thing. And yet sometimes we say, oh, something doesn't feel right about that. That's that limbic part of your brain, and that's the why. It's also the part, and here's what it comes down to. It's the part that if you are going to be successful in any organizational or any effort change that requires people, you need to compel and inspire and find something that moves people to do so. Two of the biggest obstacles we talk about, or well, big obstacle we talk about in accomplishing the goals that many of us try to accomplish organizationally is what? Staff, right? Do we have enough staff? And can we get the outcomes? Can we help them do what they want to do, what we want them to do? And I would posit this: if you give people a reason to believe what you're doing organizationally, on the path to do it, not only will you be successful in your transformation, whatever that is, but it is an absolutely necessary component to be successful and to maintain it. It injects passion into our work, expresses who we are at our natural best, and ultimately what it translates to is a development of a potent mission, vision, informs your values, and provides an opportunity for your work plan. Okay, so I love talking theory, but I also know that it's dry and boring. So I want to go into stories a little bit now. And this, by the way, this next slide, we can, well, you feel free to keep it up, but we'll move next. So I think about mission statements, which should include a why. And I know we can't raise hands, but how many of you have seen or have an organization that has a mission statement? Maybe something like this. We provide individualized custom supports to help individuals with disabilities realize their dreams. Or we help people realize their employment goals through person-centered, individualized supports. I can tell you, reading a lot of the mission statements across the state and some other organizations, that's a very common theme, right? How much does that move you? If you're trying to get somebody to work with you to help realize your mission, how compelling is that? I don't think it's super compelling. And I have to admit, for many years, I worked and was in charge of helping design missions that sounded a lot like that. And then when you infuse the why, if you can get to a genuine why do you do what you do? Why do you do what you want to do? Why do you believe what you believe? Let me posit an alternative, which ultimately could mean the same thing. We believe every human being has gifts and potentials waiting to be unlocked and discovered. We further believe that the world and humanity flourishes only when each person's gifts are revealed. cultivated, and celebrated. In partnership, everything we do here is designed to help you unlock, discover, and develop your potential to fully participate in the world around you. And we accomplish this through person-first, person-centered, individualized and expert supports. Care to learn more? For me, I'm much more moved by the second than the first. Organizational transformation, I'll go back to this. Transformation is powered by belief, meaning the answer, whatever the answer is to your why. And that's followed by vision, intention, and guided by values. Whatever project you're undergoing or intend to undergo, choose or not choose to do, start with the why. So I'm real passionate about this, obviously. How are we doing on time? Oh, good. And I want to give credit to a colleague for helping me get unstuck as a leader in my own organization. When we applied for the transformation grant last year, the discussions we had within the organization with some stakeholders is we should really do this. This is a good thing. This is the way the field's moving. Market forces are compelling this. And much of that was true. But at the time, it didn't really have much oomph, it wasn't very compelling. And we did apply and received the grant for this. And then we started working on the plan and using those 10 elements. And we got about 2 months into this, and I was feeling stuck. Like we could write down the what's and the hows. What do we have to do? When do we have to do it? What mechanisms do we need in place to accomplish what we're doing? But what I was really struggling with, and I think our organization was the energy and motivation to do it, finding the why. And two things happened in unison. I was in a meeting with my team, and my finance person, my CFO, at one point had said, okay, well, the state's telling us we have to do this. Let's just figure it out and do it. And it dawned on me. I was like, oh my gosh, we can't sell that. How do you inspire people to say, hey, we're being forced to do it, so come along with us and let's do it. And then a colleague and friend introduced the process. Elizabeth Shearer at Advance, I don't know if you're on, Elizabeth, or not, but thank you, introduced a process in a separate environment to the Find Your Why framework and led a small group of us through it. And both of those things happening at once was the aha moment for me in our organization to say, oh, okay, stop the presses, stop working on the plan, let's back up and revisit why we're doing what we're doing. What belief do we have? What do we believe that supports this? And so that took about 2 months, I think, for us to go back and open up discussions in small groups with stakeholders, with leadership, with participants, to really get at not just what do we want to do, why do we want to do what we think we want to do? We didn't even have the what yet answered. We just said, why do we want to do anything in this area? And we got great answers. And as we process those answers, and again, I can't recommend the Find Your Why book more in that process because it's a great framework to get comprehensive engagement and ultimately whittle down to something around what do you believe that supports any efforts you make in your organization. And after about 2 months, multitude of sessions and meetings and conversations, and discussions and debate, we found that answer. We found our why. And that's really what I shared with you earlier in those two different statements. And all of a sudden, the input and the energy and the focus toward accomplishing what we originally set out to accomplish, but couldn't quite get there. We were spinning our wheels. All of a sudden it was there. Participation was different. The quality of input was different. Creativity was enhanced. And I realized, all right, there we go, we got it. We still don't have a completed business plan for transformation. I believe wholeheartedly we'll be successful, but you never know. I asked the folks, the MTI folks, when they asked if I'd participate in this, and maybe they're regretting it now, I said, why would you want us? We're a small rural nonprofit provider that is like on step one of this. What is it we could possibly offer these our wonderful and highly talented expert colleagues across the state? And I thought about that question a lot. And this is what I thought we have to offer. Those of you that know me know that I have passion around certain things. What I just mentioned, transformation, growth, transportation, for those that know me. But this works. And I'm going to end this and go into some of to finish up my time with some lessons learned. But I'll say this, for any of us at different times in our career that have been tired, burned out, or find it difficult to get your feet on the floor from bed because you know work's awaiting you. When you're working in something where you don't have that why answer, where you don't have belief, or you don't have inspiration, the byproduct is stress and ultimately burnout. When you have belief, you've had your why answered, and you're inspired by that work, conversely, the byproduct is passion. So whatever you're doing in your organizations, and for that matter in your life, find that why, find that passion, and find that belief. I think I have what, maybe 2 to 3 minutes left, Stacy, is that about right? So yeah, lessons, if you can back up one slide, I just want to cover a couple logistical things. So I spent the majority of the time on the what and why. Logistically, it took time to figure out how to engage people in the organization at the right time with the right questions and format in a manageable way. I started off talking about transformation. Sometimes the term itself feels scary. It's a big word, right? And bite-sized pieces with the right, introduced in a way that doesn't completely flummox and overwhelm people. I love our technical advisors in this grant, and those at MTI will talk about, use this a lot, but one person at a time, one act at a time, one outcome at a time, one priority at a time. As you're going through any transformation, part of our goal in this transformation is to eliminate the payment and use of subminimum wages and sunset our 14C certificate, which our target is 7/31 of this year. We also, that's attached to a larger multi-year transformation effort where we can do the thing that we talked about inspiring us in our belief, is to improve the world and help it flourish and the people in it flourish by helping unlock every person's gifts and potential and cultivating that. That's our bigger goal. 14C elimination is one step on the way. But if you provide only the big goal and then say, let's get it done tomorrow, you're gonna leave a lot of people out or get the help, they're gonna get stuck. The cycle of clarity, and I think, Tammy, you've got some stuff in your area around clarity and communication, so I'll just touch on that. Communicate, clarify, check your understanding, over communicate, over clarify, over and over and over in multiple formats. So important. Yeah, I wanted to talk about rural community and around, except for transportation. I will just say this, we support people in rural and sometimes super rural areas. In transportation, yes, it's a real challenge. it's also a surmountable challenge that's going to be solved in steps across years and requires multiple systems to change. In the meantime, we just do the best we can and keep pushing for more accessible transportation options. But as a presenter, I think 2 trainings ago, think creatively, think differently, and there are solutions and resources out there. The other part that I hear often is, well, we don't have the business communities around us. And I challenge anybody that we're learning now, once we started approaching the business community, we all of a sudden realized, as a matter of fact, this morning, I just heard of a new business where they have six new openings where they really want new people coming in to work directly for them. And it's right across the road from one of the licensed sites we have. Their businesses are hiring. And we, especially in rural Minnesota, we can be a huge solution to helping fulfill their workforce needs with qualified, supported employees. Last slide, and then I will be, am I over time, Stacy?
You're good. You're good to wrap up, Tim.
Thank you so much. To repeat for the third time, everyone in every organization in all walks of your life is a leader. And you're a leader to the extent that you choose to be that leader. If anybody asks themselves a question about why you're doing what you're doing, and if you're part of an organization that is doing what you want them to do, what you believe, and you don't happen to be the CEO or president or so on, use your influence, have those discussions, share what you believe. And you'll know really quickly, based on the response you get, whether you can influence change or you may want to look toward another organization. One of the things in our job description is every person that comes into Phase Industries is a leader, and we expect them to lead. And we have a whole section in our job description and training around leadership expectations. But the number one thing is leaders lead. Don't wait for it to come from other positions that you expect to happen. Managers, supervisors, executive directors, program directors, board members. Each one of those may or may not lead. You can. As a leader, and especially to my fellow execs out there, just want to put the reminder in to intentionally think about how you categorize and use the observations you make, whether those are conversations with the folks you support, your team members, workforce members, the community, and so on. That reservoir of observation that you collect and hold, nobody else has. And it's our obligation to use that wisely and responsibly to drive, to be responsive to the desires of others, of our stakeholders, and also lead that change. And then lastly, leadership job number one, always attend to organizational culture, right? Nothing permanent occurs unless the culture permits and reinforces it. And to circle entirely back in my last statement, when we talk about culture, what does it start with? It starts with, what do you believe? What are you fully behind with every molecule of your body and spirit that you can get behind, and then let that drive the tenets of your culture. Okay, I feel like I was on the soapbox, so I appreciate your time. Again, my intention was not to waste your time for 25 minutes, and hopefully I did not do that. So thank you.
Thank you, Tim. And now we'll turn it over to our colleagues from MRCI, Tammy and Nate. Take it away.
Thank you. Thank you all for having us today. Again, I'm Tammy Reuter, and thank you, Tim, for sharing your expertise with us. In reflecting on the transformation that MRCI has undergone, there was a key component in putting together the PowerPoint today that was missing, and that was the power of teamwork. And so that was highlighted earlier. I invited my colleague, Nate Lawton, who serves as our Director of Day and Employment Services at MRCI, to join me. And so he is rightfully so, agreed to do so. So you'll be shared with not one of us, but two of us to highlight our transformation at MRCI. It was truly a we process, and we believe at our core that we have the best team that you will ever meet. And so we hope you enjoy what we have to say today. So next slide, please. The MRCI story, change happens all the time. It happens all around us, just as Tim had highlighted. So before we reflect on the most recent transformations at MRCI, it's important to realize that MRCI has been transforming for more than 70 years. In simplest terms, it just so happens that in 2018, we embarked on a strategic journey. We were tasked with creating a plan that included some significant warning signs for our organization. But let's back up to tell the MRCI story that started back in 1953, when MRCI was founded by a concerned group of community members who came together with an opportunity to serve veterans and individuals who were impacted by polio, needing to rehabilitate to help out on the family farm. That's how we were originally founded. Our mission transformed in the 1960s when MRCI began doing center-based employment. And then in the 1980s, when MRCI started working with our first clients when they found community-based employment. We all know the story of COVID-19 in 2020, but out of that disaster truly became an opportunity to take our strategic plan created in 2018 off the shelf and create what we now call the new MRCI. Next slide. Today, we are very clear on who we are. Our mission says that we provide innovative and genuine opportunities for individuals with disabilities and disadvantages at home, at work, and in the community. We do this now with a menu of services and self-direction, day services, and employment services. We serve about 3,000 individuals in our self-direction programming and about 1,000 individuals in our day and employment services. We operate statewide with our self-direction and primarily in South Central Minnesota and the Southern Metro communities with our day and employment programming. We are an employment-first organization. However, we are not an employment-exclusive organization.
So specifically for our employment services, this is meant for us as an elimination of our 14C certificate and enclaves or work crews. So our dream is that all of our clients who wanted to work would be proudly employed by employers in the community on the employer's payroll and wearing that company shirt with that logo on it, and also included in their summer picnics and their holiday parties. So it seemed like a small dream, but the idea that our clients used to be sent away for holiday parties, we felt was gonna be a win for us in the inclusion category. So we currently have more than 770 employment partners and a employment staff of 33. Day services for us is offered virtually and in community-based format. Even with our day services program, we specifically resist the desire to put logos on our vehicles and on our staff in an attempt to integrate into the community without labels. This team operates in small ratios of 1-to-4 with 1 staff and 4 clients. However, you'll find more than 50 of our staff committed to our day service programming. And then next slide. So many of you are familiar with the 10 elements of successful organizational transformation to competitive integrated employment. Over the next few minutes, we will share with some of the successes and challenges in the last couple of years as we've navigated our organization transformation to community-based. Unfortunately, we will not have enough time to touch on all 10 elements. However, please know that you're welcome to connect with us afterwards for any additional information.
So I've been told since the introduction of Microsoft Teams at MRCI that we can carry on full conversations using GIFs and emojis. We're not going to go to that extreme today. However, we're so transparent with these phrases and that this has become an MRCI language. We're going to introduce some of that language to you today. One of them that we commonly use is the term community-based. For us, that means competitive integrated employment. As we've mentioned earlier, MRCI no longer uses 14C certificate or enclaves. Next slide. So let's begin. One of the first elements is to have clear and consistent goals. At MRCI, we had a strategic plan to be community-based. It was our 5-year plan written in 2018 and to begin in 2019. The plan was very pretty on the shelf. Thankfully, it did one thing correctly, as it provided all of the staff with the why for the move to community-based. However, we could have never predicted the pandemic. Next slide.
So we learned develop your plan or roadmap. You don't have to have it in stone, but be okay with changing your course. It's a journey of continuous improvement for the organization, for each staff and each client. Prepare a clear vision statement. Why are we doing this? Communicate and explain the why, not the how. Listen carefully to what people say and don't say, and how they react. Empower your teams to create the how. They are your experts. Identify your champions and your naysayers. Include both in the planning, and then over communicate, keep all channels open and listen. And we'll continue to touch on this topic. So another element is the agency culture supports inclusion. So we remind staff that change is part of our DNA. It's always been part of who we are as an organization. If it wasn't, we would still be serving individuals with polio and non-existent today. So we focus on being proud of the work we are doing for the people we serve. And just kind of, when I started my career at MRCI 11 years ago, we had just shifted one of our extended employment programs into a community-based. That community-based consisted of our enclaves and work crews. So I kind of had a head start to, understanding what this industry is on change. So I was pretty happy that I had that opportunity now.
All right, so next slide, please. So what did we learn? Culture before strategy. Create a culture where change is normal and expected. Culture became really one of our 5 measurable benchmarks in our organization. We actually partnered with a local university to measure our culture on a monthly basis. We call that our pulse survey, and truly became committed to culture as an organization. We were committed to knowing who our leaders were and how they were reacting to change. And we looked at that and really looked at whether it was a reactive change or an innovative driven change, and know that it's a difference. Specifically, we put both types on a team called Culture Champions. And these champions met monthly. And these culture champions would meet with all of our staff in small groups on various monthly topics, also committed to culture. We flipped our organizational chart to support innovation. We were committed to listening to ideas from the bottom up and wanting to hear ideas from all levels in the organization. We were asking and we were listening. We gave everybody in the organization permission to experiment. Specifically, we talked about failing forward in the organization. That became another one of those MRCI jargon words that we just started talking about at MRCI. And of course, we celebrated new ideas and rewarded innovation. Specifically, we actually did things like Inspire-a-thons, and we can talk about that if we have time at the end. But next slide. Another element, an active person-centered job placement process. For this was really about challenging the barriers, our own personal biases, our teams, our communities, our employers, our families, the list goes on. You're thinking of all of them as we're talking. We've seen changes in earnings, skills, and smiles that are beyond expectations. So pair them with the social programming that we also brought in our day service programming. that was brought to us by the pandemic, and we have a win-win. Next slide. So for us, staffing is as important to having the right people in the right seats at the right time. We diversified our teams to bring the right staff with non-traditional industry backgrounds as well. We acknowledge that not every client, or we acknowledge that every client was unique, and that every client, however, every client who found a job was exciting for everyone. We got super excited and was motivated, driven by the fact that clients were finding jobs in the community. That drove our why across the organization. It took huge courage for us as an organization to say no to crews and enclaves, no to contracts, but it was also affirming and reaffirming to see employers come back to us asking for help, asking to rehire clients once they realized we were serious about our intentions. And so trust the process, trust your why. And then we used innovation to add new programming, whether it was self-advocacy programming, drivers training are some of our examples. And we had fun with this. Whether it was in staff meetings and just celebrating those successes. So next page.
So the next element was to have a strong internal and external communication plan. During the pandemic, we faced an additional challenge here. We were consistently facing external message of, I thought MRCI was closed, which impacted clients, families, case managers, and the list goes on. So do we still have this kind of ongoing, but continuing to share what MRCI is doing now, and how that change has affected people, and for those that maybe I guess I did not know that we were open, or thought maybe people weren't able to go out and work competitively, and today they are out there now, earning that paycheck and being integrated in the community.
So the lesson that we learned here is, and are still constantly being reminded of, is that communication is not a once and done. Specifically, we tell our staff on the first day of orientation that we expect them to communicate 7 times and in 7 different ways. So some tips on this is to make a communication plan, listen to your feedback, read your cues, and respond. We initially had our message just said that we were going to communicate 7 times. But we had to diversify our plan to say it was 7 times in 7 different ways, because we learned during the pandemic that just saying something 7 times doesn't mean that somebody's going to hear it. And so we communicate through personal phone calls, meetings, emails, web, social media, newsletters, letters. But unfortunately, we are not perfect. We still have some segments that are missing our messages. And we attempt to be transparent, as mentioned previously, and attempt to communicate the why. But 7 times, 7 ways, and just do your best to communicate those expectations often and to as many people as possible. Next slide.
As we look to reallocation and restructure resources, this element once seemed to make a lot of sense. However, for us, it was about implementing, evaluating, and refining. If it was not working, going back to the drawing board and finding a solution. And the easy approach was about failing forward. We didn't give ourselves permission to do nothing or wait for everything to be perfect, but we had permission at all levels in the organization to learn from what we were doing as long as we were moving forward.
Next slide. Another element was on ongoing professional development of all staff. We had numerous mission moments of our clients. But for us, we were also looking for those innovative inspirations from our staff, examples of our employees at all levels providing meaningful ideas and energy to the mission. We created gateways for these cultured champions, those monthly small groups that we're getting together to inspire culture conversations, and those friendly competitions with our Inspire-a-thons to inspire creativity and teamwork, and to create that why, and to keep that moving forward and create that energy. COVID-19 provided us an opportunity to bring our airplane, which we have called our MRCI programming, to the ground. But over the past couple years, our staff have had our airplane in flight, and we've had to learn to make continuous improvements while our plane has been in motion. So, next page. So in summary, as you're implementing your plan, which will be very different than MRCI's plan, consider it a journey. Hold true to your culture, and remember, just like Tim shared, that everyone leads. Be extremely agile and ready to regroup.
Celebrate your successes and enjoy the journey.
Next slide. And thank you for having us here today. We are happy to answer questions today as well as in the future. Our contact information is up on the screen, and you are happy to write it down.
Okay, thank you, Tammy and Nate, and also Tim for your presentation earlier. And now we're going to move on to the question and answer portion. And it looks like we've got one question here from Sarah Hall. How did you guys jump over the hurdle of finding community work for those clients that are not high functioning?
I can jump in. So one of our big things is looking at the natural supports that we can build within our employers that we once relied on our staff to do. And we learned, a lot of our work crews or enclaves that we had, they were the first ones we went to talk about, we made this transition and we are strictly competitively employed clients, and those are the jobs we're looking for. So, we would go in and do some job coaching and, teach them kind of, some of the minor things that they can do to, make that person successful in that job. So it was just, really kind of teaching them what it is that our job coaches were taught to do. And many employers have taken that upon, and we're willing to learn. And, we continue to talk to these employers, and, they want more of our individuals to go there just because they know that they have our support when they need it. And, and we're willing to go in there and kind of, teach them as well.
And
Thank
I
you.
think to Nate's point, it's really a two-way street. We are their resource just as much as it, in terms of that employer relationship. Having that relationship with the employer and being that phone call away is also important. It's not a goodbye, never see you again kind of relationship.
Thank you, Nate and Tammy. Tim, did you have anything you wanted to add to that question?
Well, yes and no. That is a question that's come up a lot within our organization. Now, we are 50 steps, behind MRCI on this, but again, like a broken record, for us, the way that we answered it was by answering our why. And a part of our belief is that every human being has unlocked potential and gifts. And our primary job is to partner with them to help them unlock those gifts and potential. And through that, then that's where we're going to help them explore whatever occupational interests they have. Now, it won't always necessarily be the same as what MRCI is providing. And I so appreciate both Nate and Tammy, the pragmatic kind of solutions to some of those hurdles. We don't yet have a lot of those pragmatic solutions, but if we're starting with we believe that it's absolutely possible, we'll figure it out.
Brian, let me give you one more story that happened just this week. We talk a little bit about the why, and our goal was to feel good about the holiday parties. And we said that, kind of as a at the very beginning of this. It actually happened for us this week. And I actually mentioned it to Nate earlier. We had a Valentine's party at MRCI. And one of the individuals that we serve through employment services participates both in our day service program and in our employment services. And the individual works on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and every other weekend, but typically participates in our day service program on the other days. So they have both that mix. They're kind of the perfect example of, we're an employment first organization, but we're not an employment exclusive organization. So they're the perfect example of what MRCI stands for. And so they came up to me and were very proud to explain to me how they got to take a paid vacation day to come to the MRCI holiday party, to join in, to be there on Tuesday, because they wouldn't have typically been in day services that day, because they would have normally been working. And so I think to see your whys come to fruition is very exciting. And so you see all levels.
Thank you, Tammy and Nate and Tim. The next question we have is on the everyone is a leader. How do you allow bottom-up communication in a meaningful way?
So you create channels and opportunities in which to do so. I can highlight, one of the things in which we did is, I didn't get a chance to touch on this. So we did something called an Inspire-a-thon. This was an idea that was brought forward by one of our coordinators in the organization. And it was something that a friend of hers did at another company. And they did it as a way to solve a problem of some sort. So we spun it in a true MRCI style. And took 3 of our benchmarks that we have in the organization. We have 5 total, but we took 3 of them. And we focused on client, process, and customer. And said to our organization, out of those 3 benchmarks, if there's a challenge that you're facing in this organization related to one of those 3, come up in small groups with a solution. Identify the challenge, and then work in small groups and identify the solution. And they presented ideas to senior leadership for those ideas, and all ideas were listened to and heard. And that was one idea. And of course, fabulous prizes. Everything, deserves fabulous prizes sometimes. And so, but fabulous prizes were awarded, but all ideas were heard, with the idea that the top idea was going to be implemented. Ultimately, we ended up implementing several of the ideas because the solutions were just that great.
I could jump in and add a little bit to that. In our organization, it's very much it's part of the culture. The simple answer is there's a cultural expectation and the accountability loops that everybody be a servant leader. And then we set out, I don't know if you'd call them channels, but set that out. So for example, for everybody that is hired in, one of the first introductions I get, and I love doing this session, this international training, is on code of ethics. And through there, we talk about everyone's a leader and what does that mean? And there's a model we use called LMEC, or Large Mindedness Effective Communication Training. And that provides a framework for input at all levels to run up whatever around any channels that need to be that exist. So people have to be welcomed in and know how they can contribute, right? And then there needs to be a response about what does your contribution mean? So one of what we try to aspire to do is that any of those contributions, if we use them as an organization, we provide feedback. If we choose not to use them as an organization, or at least not now, we also provide feedback. So there's some reinforcing loop there. The second part of that is pardon me, the simple idea of availability, again, welcoming in feedback that is not necessarily jumping a chain of command. So I talked about this initial training and expectation. When we talk about effective communication, one of the things we make clear in our organizational culture is we don't have, everybody thinks the concept of open communication or open door policies is great. I find those to be, frankly, dangerous in organizations, because what that does is it alleviates the responsibility for people to directly communicate their requests and ultimately complaints directly with another person. And there's a million examples of why open door policies that way aren't effective. I mean, if we had time, I'd love to run through one, but what we do have is effective communication, which means contribute as a problem solver, as a solution agent, and as a risk taker. And one of the lessons that we constantly reinforce across our entire organization, our workforce, and our service recipients is anything that we've done that's worked really well, it's never once come from me or senior leadership. It comes in an organic, from the ground, not from the ground, but from what's the term I'm looking for? It's a natural-based organic movement, and those get celebrated. So that's not a quick formulaic way of saying that's how communication channels can work in organizations, but it really starts with the expectation, spirit, and then invitation to have all input be heard and be responded to.
Okay, thank you, Tammy. Thank you, Tim. Nate, anything you'd like to add before we move on to the next question?
I think just going back to, it's taking the ideas from everybody. We've had a lot of meetings where bringing lunch in and just kind of, here's what we want to solve today. Everybody just, throw their ideas in, and then we kind of just work through those. And it's amazing what the ideas that people have. And so we've definitely utilized a lot of those to be where we are today.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you. We got another question here. What does your day services program look like?
I assume that's coming for us.
Hmm.
So we have 3 components to our day service program. We have a virtual component. We have a community-based component, and then we have a component for our retirees. And our virtual is amazing. And it's virtual as it sounds. And they meet throughout the course of the day. And our community-based program, I think, is the one that you're really after. So I'll spend most of the time there. It's a 1-to-4 ratio. 1 staff, 4 clients. All of our staff have a minivan parked in their driveway every night. That's MRCI issued, and they pick up 4 clients every day. They could be the same 4 clients or 4 different clients, depending on their schedule, because the clients may work or may have a consistent participation in the community-based program, but they logistically live in close proximity to the staff, because again, we're Southern Minnesota, Southern Metro. So within proximity, they live remotely close to the staff and other clients, but they do not all live in the same group home. So it's not all 4 from the same home, or even any from the same home. And then the clients and staff together plan the community-based activities, but they are doing skill building and community activities that could involve and do involve volunteering for and with the community. So we have volunteers coming that volunteer with them, and they do volunteering to benefit their community as well. We have some groups that are, one in particular, that is just a group of 4 that love history. So anything remotely close to a historical landmark within driving distance of their homes, they have visited. We have one group that really enjoys volunteering with Meals on Wheels. And so they use their wheels to benefit their local community and give back in that way. I have another group that loves animals. So anytime that they can do anything with animals, they are volunteering or learning more about that. So, you say Rad Zoo in Owatonna and they are all there, or you say Humane Society and they are definitely there as well. And so, using those relationships. Our goal when we built our vision, our pipeline dream, and we said this more than once, is that we would walk into a local coffee shop someday with our group of 4 individuals to plan our activities. And the local barista would know us by name, not as the MRCI clients, but they would know each of the clients there by name. We've had that happen to the point where we've actually had one of the local baristas call us on a Wednesday morning because we didn't show up, because they were a little worried that something had happened, because the group that normally had shown up, they were just a little worried that maybe something had come up, and they were just planning something else that day. So it was kind of fun that they were able to call and check in. So high level volunteering for and with the community, skill building, but a very person-centered in our activities, and we use our wheels to do good things.
Thank you, Tammy. And Tim, anything you want to add?
That's such a good question, and it's one that we really struggled with when we thought about what does our transformation journey look like. And our journey is right now a little different than MRCI's, in that we have chosen to maintain our licensed facilities, in part using them differently, but also acting as a community hub or a site or a place in which we can utilize and improve what we do from there, including in part some day services. Because, and I know MRCI, you guys have some very rural support service areas as well. But as we looked at what does transformation look like as far as any services that are not employment based, we had a couple questions that came to mind in helping determine how we move forward. Number one was, do we have any need to have Phase Industries owned licensed buildings in the communities we have them in to successfully perform our work? And in answering that, does it enhance the transformation work by having them, or does it hinder the transformation work by having them? And at this point, we believe, done right, that it can enhance the transformation work that we're doing. So the question, which I'm not, there's underpinnings to that question, which I'm not aware of, but for whatever it's worth, we have taken the path of working to use differently the way that we utilize licensed sites with that. Then the second piece with day services is And I'll just, in full disclosure, one of the things that is really a struggle sometimes within our own organization is seeing something that looks so antiquated in the use of sites to provide day services. And I'm sure everybody can envision or visualize what that might be. And we struggle with that as well. And so as we look to change what DSS looks like, our litmus test is anything that we offer different. I mean, the principles of community inclusion and integration are underlie what we want to do differently. I mean, basic examples, instead of having, somebody come in to a licensed site and do an exercise class, let's help cultivate gym memberships, go to the classes there. And there's 100 different things there, even in rural communities. I mean, some of the communities we serve in are there's very small things to do, or not a ton of things to do, but there not only are there things and businesses and places, but there are people, and that's where our focus is going to be in our plan, is getting those people that have expertise, the artists, the retirees that move into the areas and want to be around lakes, the fishing guides, so on and so forth, and doing those activities that are, number one, as meaningful or more meaningful to the people we serve as whatever we're doing now. That's our litmus test. It has to be as or more meaningful. And number two, fully included and participating in the community. Not a great logistical, practical answer, but as we move through the process,
Oh, I think Tim may have froze on us. So while we wait for Tim to rejoin us, I'm going to, I see we've got a question here for Tammy. Regarding your community day services, how do your staff handle situations where an individual requires physical assistance, such as using the bathroom? I'm thinking of folks that use wheelchairs specifically.
So we have, so we do have several of our vehicles. So we operate on a 1-to-4 ratio. So several of our vehicles are modified for accessibility. And then not all of them, however. So we operate as a 1-to-4. And so our clients have, at this point, we're operating under that ratio. We are experimenting with different ratios of staffing. Right now we're piloting a ratio of a 1-to-2. And we have some scenarios where we're doing a 1, where we're trying a 1-to-1 and adding that staff into the group that's already a 1-to-4. And so these are the things that we're just trying different scenarios to see what's going to work and what's not going to work going forward. We, in terms of the bathroom situation in particular, to call that one out, when all the COVID dollars came out, one of the angles that we tried to play, not so successfully, was to try our government, or to convince our government partners to go after some of the COVID dollars to retrofit some of their bathrooms to make them more accessible as well. We had some success in one of our rural communities. The local paper actually picked up on that. And actually was the most, that rural community in particular was the quickest to adapt and adopt our day service program and include us into the community, I will say. That community or that van that started out there has zero problem finding things to do, and actually had more volunteer projects than they knew what to do with, to the point where we were actually sharing projects with other groups from other communities. And so in terms of bathrooms, we're still struggling with that and making that adjustment, but we're trying to lobby community partners to make some of the bathrooms more accessible for our higher need individuals is the easy answer.
Tammy,
Okay.
I have a question for you. You mentioned early on in your presentation something called pulse surveys, and I wonder if you could describe how you rolled that out and kind of what you were surveying and how you were using that information.
Yeah, so it's so we work with Minnesota State University Mankato, a graduate program there, and they conduct an independent survey once a month for us. They survey all of our staff. Every month, the questions historically have been the same. However, in the last 6 months, we've added one question that varies, one open response question that differs, so that we get different feedback from our staff now in terms of an open response question. But we ask things like work-life balance, engagement from, or are you getting communication from leadership, and just a series of probably 8 other questions. That's the survey itself is intended to take 3 minutes or less and just give us a quick pulse on how you're overall feeling in the organization. If we get 10 or more responses from a department, MSU will give us independent data for that department. So I can get day service department data, and I can get employment department data, and I can get self-direction department data, and I can get admin department data. If for some reason we would fall below 10 employees in any one department, which we've not had for a long time now, since our employment numbers are higher, then they would not give me that because they don't want to make sure, they want to make sure that we're not able to decipher any of the individuals one way or the out and signal anybody out independently. So, but it's just a quick response. We get it the second week of the month consistently from a grad student. They send it to us. We get the survey results 2 weeks later. We publicly share the results in full transparency in the organization as to how our overall feeling is as an organization. We look at them as departments and give us the platform to actually talk about, to assess, okay, what could we have done better last month to improve our communications? Is there more that you need from me as in the organization? Is there something, that we're needing, that we can be doing better? It just gives an open way to set that communication up without singling out any one particular issue, but gives you 8 things to talk about in an easy ongoing conversation.
Thank you, Tammy, and welcome back, Tim. So a follow-up, Tammy, how do you get staff to fill out a survey monthly?
I have no idea. It's short and sweet and to the point. And I think because we use the data, they've been happy to contribute to it. Nate, do you have any ideas as to why they fill it out?
I am not sure of that, but we do cover the, we'll talk about it in our groups, especially in our supervisor groups. So, so people are aware of kind of the areas that we need to grow or areas that we're doing really well in. So I think maybe staff have seen that we are using the information that we pull, and we do, we talk about the areas that we know we have to improve in. And so I think there is some, they see it as a valid point to complete, because we will.
Yeah, we used to do one of these engagement employee surveys, where you did it once every 3 years and it sat on the shelf kind of thing. And it was really long and intensive. We don't do that. We do this instead. I don't think we used that data that we did once every 3 years, and this just has a completely different feel. I think because we actually use this information, it's just got a little different feel to it. we actually do something with it. And I think to Tim's point earlier, where we're actually using the information, and it's not a knee-jerk reaction when we get the information. We actually, if somebody complains about something, we actually do investigate to see that it's just not somebody, who's going rogue. We make sure that it's affecting the whole. But, if there's something in there that's a valid concern, we're catching it before it's, something more significant. Sometimes it's our why. We've just missed explaining the why, or we've missed, we forgot to highlight that. Let's go back and catch that again before this gets out of control.
Okay, thank you. And do we have any other questions? Oh, looks like we just got one more. Okay, with DWRS reimbursement rates so low, how are you attracting new DSPs to the field since the pandemic? Always a relevant question for us in this line of work.
So we're experimenting with, to that point, new non-traditional sources of DSPs. Maybe I'll let Nate take this one and talk a little bit about some of the non-traditional sources.
Yeah, so a lot of our job postings that we put out, and we really kind of took that experience, work with people with disabilities, for community, for our day service programs, and we changed the title to an activities assistant, or community activities assistant. So we're pulling people in that have managed restaurants. On the employment side, we have a staff that used to do like horse training. So we're looking outside of that traditional, people that have that experience work with people with disabilities, because we can train those concepts and we can train the ideas, but it's harder to train a staff on being able to go out and talk to an employer or talk to a volunteer to ask them to come to our service, or what can we do for you. So we really are looking at those people that have that and are able to talk to our community resources that we utilize quite often.
So we flipped our thinking in our hiring.
Okay. Oh no, unfortunately, it looks like we've lost Tim again, because we would have liked to have heard his answer, but okay. And now we've got about 5 more minutes, and another question just came in for you, Tammy. Does MRCI have any center-based work still available for people?
No, we eliminated all center-based work. So we last did it on, I think our last day was Valentine's Day, the year of the pandemic.
Okay, 2020.
No, not
Wow.
Valentine's Day, St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah, March 17th, 2020, right when everything was shutting down. An appropriate time to sunset that or end that. So, all right. Well, any further questions? Okay, housekeeping. Mark your calendars, everyone. Coming up in 2023, our next MTI quarterly training is on the topic of community life engagement, and this will be May 25th at 1 p.m. On this slide, it has a link to take you to the MTI landing page, and there's lots of great information there for you. And
just a reminder, I did pop in the chat box the PDF of today's presentation, but if you haven't had a chance to pull that down, just a reminder, the recording of this entire presentation, as well as the PowerPoint slides, will be emailed to everyone that registered. So if you didn't get a chance to pull that, no big deal, and you can access this link from that PowerPoint as well. So it looks like we're at the end of our time, and we'd like to give a hearty thank you to Tammy and Nate and Tim for sharing your stories around transformation and your lessons learned. I think this was really valuable, and we hope that we will see all of you all for our next training in May. Thank you all very much.